My name is Kyle, and I was married to Marissa for almost 7 years. We lived in a house that technically belongs to my parents, Linda and James, who moved into a retirement community and let us stay in the family home. Before all of this happened, I thought my life was comfortable, predictable, and built on a solid foundation of trust. I never expected to learn that the person I trusted so deeply would be actively trying to start an affair with someone I consider a friend. Over the course of a year, I went from discovery to divorce, and I want to share my entire experience, including the chaos, heartbreak, and eventual forward progress. One evening, Marissa and I had a simple routine going, dinner together. Then we split up to do our own things. I relaxed in the living room, flipping between the local football game on TV and tackling some small tasks I'd put off for a while. Meanwhile, she grabbed a couple bottles of wine and hung out in the den watching her favorite shows. By midnight, I realized she'd had two entire bottles of wine that's passed out on the couch. When I went to help her upstairs, I noticed her smartwatch and iWatch lighting up on her wrist. A message had popped up on the screen. It read something like, "I can't do that. Kyle would beat the crap out of me." My immediate thought was, what on earth is she talking about? So I tapped on the message. To my shock, it was a conversation between Marissa and a guy named Travis, someone I'd known since our teenage years, though I wouldn't say he was my closest friend. We played five-a-side soccer together, gone out drinking in groups, but mostly just kept casual contact over the years. He was the type we used to jokingly call the jacket holder because whenever teenage fights broke out, Travis was the one who stood back pretending to hold everyone's coats instead of actually helping. Well, it appeared Travis had messaged Marissa first, unless there were older messages that she had deleted. As I scrolled up, I saw a lot of flirty banter, but nothing conclusive, until I got to the exchanges from that very night. Marissa, who'd obviously been very drunk, was openly begging him for sex. She said how she'd always wanted him, how they could keep it a secret, and how she was great at keeping secrets. My heart sank at the phrase. It felt like a dagger in my chest. In that moment, it was as if every ounce of love and respect I had for her evaporated. Not knowing what else to do, I put Marissa to bed, then wandered into the kitchen, just sitting there in silent shock. Around 5:30 in the morning, I tried going to work when I got into my van, placed my forehead on the steering wheel, and realized I couldn't handle it. I went back inside, grabbed a half-empty bottle of vodka, topped it with cola, and walked out toward the abandoned railway line near our home. By then, I was half out of my mind with anger, heartbreak, and betrayal. We live in a small community of about 15,000 people with woods and an unused railway line that stretches for miles. I found myself huddled under a railway bridge, sipping from the vodka cola mix, trying to figure out what to do. Two dog walkers noticed me, probably concerned about how I looked, and they came over to check on me. I ended up telling them what had happened, and one of them warned me not to keep drinking because it would only create more carnage. That advice might have saved me a world of hurt. I dumped the vodka and reached out to a friend of mine named Mark. Mark was at work, but he told me where to find a spare key and said I could crash at his place if I needed to cool down. So I walked to Mark's house, let myself in, and sat on his couch, ignoring phone calls and texts from Marissa. She was blowing up my phone, probably confused that my work van was still in our driveway, but I'd vanished. I sent her a message lying that there was an engine problem, so I got a lift to work. She bought the excuse, but wanted to know what was really going on. I still wasn't ready to face her. Mark got home around 5 in the afternoon. I told him every detail about Travis' messages, about Marissa's text begging him for sex, about how disgusting it all felt. Mark's advice was to stay calm, keep a low profile, gather more information, and also reach out to a divorce lawyer to see where I stood legally. I took his advice. We drove back to my house around 6, by which time I was utterly exhausted. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving me feeling more tired than I'd ever been in my life. When I walked through my front door, Marissa was immediately on me, pestering me about my work van, where I'd been, and what was up. She'd noticed my lunch bag and thermos still in the van, along with me missing for hours. She said she could sense something was wrong. I was too drained to keep lying, so I just told her. I saw the messages on her watch, saw her begging Travis for sex, and I knew she was a disgusting cheater. Her face instantly changed from defiant to terrified. She started sobbing, claiming it was all the alcohol, that she'd never done anything like this before, that Travis messaged her first, and that it was harmless fantasy, nothing more. I told her we were done, that I wanted a divorce and she should move out of the house. She slept in our spare bedroom that night. I barely spoke to her the next day. When I reached out to my parents to explain that I wanted her gone and had a rude awakening, my mother, Linda, was furious at me for wanting to put Marissa on the street. She insisted we talk like adults and not make rash decisions. She emphasized that Marissa hadn't physically cheated. My father, James, is a quiet man who always defers to my mother, so his opinion was basically a moot point. This sudden side taking by my mother left me feeling betrayed by my own family. I realized this might get complicated. Marissa refused to leave. She had nowhere else to go. Her own family background is rocky and small, so she doesn't have many close relatives or friends. But I was adamant I wouldn't let it go. I visited a divorce lawyer for the first time a few days later, told him everything, and started preparing to file. Meanwhile, Marissa stayed in the spare bedroom, and the house turned into a war zone of silent tension. We effectively avoided each other. The living room became an empty no man's land. I would come home from work, go directly to my bedroom, or stay out working late to avoid her entirely. Over those first few days, she pleaded relentlessly, offering every excuse. Drunken mistake. It never would have happened. Travis had messaged her first. It meant nothing. It was just words. Nothing she said softened me. I remembered her message to Travis, "I'm great at keeping secrets." That line kept echoing in my mind. Had she been lying for who knows how long? How could I trust her again? It was around this time that I also started ignoring Travis completely. Some people said he didn't do anything wrong. But that's nonsense. He's the one who reached out with flirty messages in the first place. I believed he was scum. A few local friends were outraged on my behalf, and Travis ended up ostracized from our social circles. Of course, part of me wanted to knock him out, but assault charges wouldn't have helped. As if my wife's betrayal wasn't enough, my parents sided with her. My mother, in particular, insisted Marissa had made a mistake and I needed to think carefully before throwing her out. This escalated to heated arguments between me and Linda, during which I asked her point blank, "Whose side are you on anyway?" She reasoned that she viewed Marissa like the daughter she never had. My mother had once lost a baby girl during pregnancy and saw Marissa as a surrogate child. Now Mom refused to budge, saying the house belongs to them, not me, and they wouldn't let me evict Marissa. Stop. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. It's important to me. I tried to explain how insane it was to let this continue. My mother stuck to the script. Give it a few months, try counseling, and see where everyone is emotionally. The thought of living under the same roof, dragging out the tension for months, sounded like torture. About 3 weeks in, I realized that no matter what I did or how I felt, my mother wouldn't let me force Marissa out. This standoff was making me miserable. I told my parents, "If you choose to keep her here, then you're losing me." They still wouldn't budge. My father remained passive, letting my mother decide everything. My mother implied that I was overreacting and that we needed to handle it like adults. But I couldn't bear it any longer. Finally, one morning I noticed on our household calendar that Marissa had an ophthalmologist appointment. Knowing she'd be gone for hours, I packed as many belongings as I could, left my keys on the kitchen table along with the preliminary divorce papers from my lawyer, and walked out. I blocked her number and told any further communication had to be done through my lawyer. I ended up moving in with Mark temporarily. Linda and James tried contacting me, but I refused to speak to them. In my mind, they'd made their choice. They chose Marissa, the person who betrayed me, over their own son. Maybe that's an oversimplification, but it's how I felt. I found a job a short drive away, set up a new phone number, and started the process of building a new life. I was furious, brokenhearted, and determined all at once. As for Travis, he never tried to contact me. I guess he realized that we were well past the point of discussing anything civilly. A few months went by. I got a call from Mark at work saying my father was trying to reach me. My mother was in the hospital. Reluctantly, I allowed him to give my dad my new phone number. When Dad called, he sounded more emotional than I'd ever heard him in my entire life. He told me that Linda had taken a terrible fall, broken a couple ribs, shattered her elbow, bruised her face, and spent hours on the floor before Dad found her. Now she was hospitalized in stable but serious condition. She desperately wanted to see me. I wrestled with the decision. Part of me wanted to ignore them. Another part felt obligated to visit. Ultimately, I decided to go. My father and I agreed to meet outside the hospital. It was the first time I'd seen him in months. He tried to hug me, but I backed away. Immediately, I told him if Marissa is inside, I'm leaving. He insisted Marissa wasn't there. With that settled, we went in to see my mother. Seeing her was a shock. She looked fragile with black eyes, bruises, and a discolored face from the fall. I felt a pang of sympathy. She told me how much she missed me, how she worried she'd never see me again. I responded that she had never truly tried to fix our relationship or show me any loyalty. She just took Marissa's side. My mother repeated that Marissa was lost and alone without me, that I should come home and that we could all sort it out. That's when I realized she hadn't changed. She still wanted me to forgive and forget, pretend we could have some sort of normal future together. I told her I wanted a divorce, that Marissa hadn't responded to any official letters, and she was still living in the house. My mother admitted Marissa was indeed still there. My stomach twisted in disgust. Nothing had changed. I left after less than an hour. It hurt to see her in such bad condition, but I had to protect myself emotionally. As Dad walked me out, he asked if I'd try to keep in touch with him. I told him maybe, but I didn't promise anything. After that, I went back to Mark's place, feeling a swirl of anger and sadness. Over the next few weeks, my lawyer continued sending official requests to Marissa, urging her to cooperate with the divorce. She kept ignoring them. Eventually, we started the process of applying for a deemed service, which would allow the courts to finalize the divorce even without her participation. Then, out of the blue, she finally responded. According to a mutual acquaintance, Marissa had realized I wasn't coming back, that my parents couldn't fix it for her, and she'd have to start moving on. She told my dad that she would sign the papers and wouldn't fight me for any property or money. The house belonged to my parents anyway, so there wasn't much to contest. Hearing that felt like a weight off my shoulders. I wanted a clean break. I didn't want to keep rehashing her excuses. Meanwhile, my mother recovered from her injuries, but our relationship remained non-existent. Even though my father tried to talk to me occasionally, my mother's loyalty to Marissa had driven me away. The resentment ran deep. Part of me wondered, will I ever forgive them? Another part concluded probably not. Throughout this year, I've had wild fluctuations of anger, sadness, nostalgia, and bitterness. It became clear that I needed professional help, or else the trauma would fester. I started attending therapy sessions with a psychiatrist, which turned out to be an enormous relief. I talked about how my mother's choice felt like a betrayal. I talked about how painful it was to discover that Marissa had so blatantly thrown our marriage away. My psychiatrist told me something that stuck with me. Your best years are the ones you still have ahead of you. That advice shifted my perspective. I could sit around lamenting that I wasted my youth on someone unworthy, or I could accept that the past is gone and focus on the future. Little by little, I started to heal. I opened a new bank account, found a small place to rent, and began building a new routine for myself. I realized how crucial loyalty was, yet ironically, it's something you only truly test when the other person breaks it. Knowing that Marissa said, I'm great at keeping secrets, felt like a sick joke. As if she'd successfully done it before, lying who knows how many times. It haunted me to think I might never have discovered any of it had I not walked in at that exact moment to see her watch lighting up. She might still be living under my parents' roof, enjoying a comfortable life, while I naively believed we were happily married. About a year after the first discovery, my divorce was nearly finalized, just waiting on final paperwork. I hadn't seen Marissa in person for many months. Then, while running an errand in the town center, I walked into a store, and just as I stepped inside, she was walking out. We locked eyes. Both of us wore masks because of the ongoing health concerns, but I recognized her immediately. She mumbled something, maybe Kyle. But I didn't reply, and we just stared at each other for a few seconds. Then I walked deeper into the shop. Once she was gone, this immense wave of sorrow washed over me. It reminded me that sometimes you can feel heartbreak all over again with just one brief encounter. I realized I didn't actually miss her. I missed the person I believed she was. There's a difference. That old fantasy, that sweet, devoted partner simply doesn't exist. If she ever did, that version of her is long gone. For my own sanity, I decided not to hate her or wish her harm. The only person that hatred would hurt in the long run is me. When Marissa and I were married, she hated flying, which limited our vacations to places within driving distance. Now I'm free to pursue a dream I always had, traveling the world. My friend Mark and I intended to book a trip to New York in the fall. The ever shifting travel restrictions delayed our initial plan. We haven't made it yet, but we're set on going in the new year. After that, who knows? I'd like to see Europe or maybe visit parts of Asia. It excites me to think of these new horizons. As for my parents, we remain distant. My father occasionally tries, but I feel mostly apathy toward them. Once upon a time, I wanted them to sign over the house to me as a show of good faith, but now I don't care. The house is tainted by negative memories. Let them keep it or figure out what they want to do with Marissa. I'm done. I accept that they made their choice and I made mine. I remember one terrifying night after cutting my leg at work and developing a possible infection. I nearly thought I had sepsis. Waiting for emergency care that night was a clarifying experience. In that moment, I'd accepted the possibility I might die. A strange sense of calm washed over me. I see a parallel with betrayal. At some point, you must accept that the relationship you had is dead. Prolonging a doomed marriage only multiplies the pain. Some people manage to reconcile after infidelity, but I suspect the success stories are overshadowed by heartbreak. If your partner can so casually stab you in the back, do you really want to exhaust yourself trying to fix something that was already broken at the core? I feel more resilient now. Writing everything down, whether in online forums or personal journals, has helped me process the chaos and see how I've grown. Betrayal, especially from someone you love, ignites powerful emotions, but once you move through them, you can emerge stronger. To anyone reading this, if you find yourself in a similar predicament, please remember, you are not alone. Seek help from friends or a therapist. Don't let the betrayal define your future. Don't drown your pain in rage or substances. It only complicates things. Most importantly, your best years can still be the ones ahead, even if it feels like the rug has been pulled out from under you. This is where my story stands. The divorce is final. My parents remain at distant presence, and I'm forging a new path. I won't pretend it's been easy. I no longer wake up every day feeling bitterness weighing me down. Instead, there's a cautious hope. A hope that I can rebuild a life based on genuine trust, find new adventures, and maybe eventually learn to love again without suspicion or fear. Thank you to everyone who offered advice or simply listened. A year ago, I was in pieces under a railway bridge, half drunk and confused. Today, I'm sober, self-aware, and ready to shape my future on my own terms. That in itself feels like a victory.